Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca. Pardon the odd framing, but we got Rue in. He's the most important part of the vlog, obviously. So that should tip you off that we are kicking off a reading vlog today. I had a theme in mind for a long time, and I picked up a book unrelated from the library just because I wanted to read it and realized it would be a great starter for this theme. And that first book is Ballad of Perilous Graves by Alex Jennings. You can obviously see we've got a little skeleton playing the piano there, so very clearly musical. This one was on my priority list of 2022 releases to get to. Going into 2023, I make that list at the start of the following year, basically, and I still haven't gotten to it. That was a pretty long list that year. So this one is following a young boy so far, because I have started it, who is very musical in New Orleans, which is a very musical city, and involves some definitely paranormal-y stuff, ghosts and haunts, certainly, and he seems to be on a magical quest. So that seems very fun and musical, for sure. Definitely contemporary fantasy, I think, is where I would most put this. And then the next one I have is Epic Fantasy, Last Song Before Night by Ilana C. Meyer. This one is a really unique setup because effectively we're in a secondary world where artistic expression, art creation is powerful magically. And of course, it being powerful, women are not allowed to do it. So in this particular book, we're following a woman who is a musician, secretly, I think. And also in this world, in the past, there was a plague, and it has risen again, it seems. So I'm curious to see how the art, magical power, and plague are all going to play together. Very intriguing and unique. And I think this is now a trilogy, each kind of companion novels with different types of art that we're exploring different characters as well. And then the last one is The Memory of Whiteness by Kim Stanley Robinson. Big name sci-fi author who I have not read from before and am excited to dive into. I've got several of his books, in fact. But this one, very unique. This is following an orchestra on tour around the solar system. And I think that the orchestra conductor is being chased and hunted by someone following them, some big bad across the universe. So I don't know. I mean, that sounds like an intriguing premise. Like, I can't believe I haven't heard anybody else do something like that. But a touring space orchestra sounds amazing to me. So those are my 3 books for now. Depending on how quickly this goes, I do have multiple other options. At least one that I really, really want to read from my current year TBR too. So we shall see. But I did kind of already mention this, that I have started this one, that I am, at least at the beginning, following a young boy who is going on a sort of quest adventure at the beginning, it seems. And I didn't get too far before immediately grabbing the audio. And I'm so glad I did that, because in New Orleans, there are very heavy accents, and there are multiple strong accented dialogue that you probably want to hear, or it's helpful to hear. There's also quite a lot of music throughout, so the audio is really, really helping. So I'm enjoying it. The narration is fantastic so far. So I'm only a little bit into this, but I will be diving in more and checking up later. All right, I am almost halfway through Ballad of Perilous Graves. This is so fresh and different. Yeah, and it's not what I expected at all, really. So I think I mentioned that we were following young Perry Graves as he's going on this kind of adventurous quest, and that is true. It's very much set in contemporary New Orleans, and New Orleans it feels like very, very alive, in part because of the magical elements. It's tying into that sense of the supernatural and paranormal that New Orleans has very strongly. Kind of haunts are a big element. The idea of zombies and things like that, ghosts, hauntings, that plays in, but not in a spooky way, really. More prominently, what's going on here is that there's a rhythm to the city. New Orleans is a very musical city, so this feels so fitting that there are these songs that underlie the city, and things are going wrong in the city because the songs have become embodied and sort of wandered around. They're out wandering about. And some of them are just simply mischievous and causing problems, and others are kind of malevolent. So they're not, some of them seem mildly friendly, but kind of mischievous. But for the most part,
they're not really helpful, definitely. So the kids, Perry's a child, him and his sister Brendy, and Peaches, who lives near them, and Perry has a crush on. She seems to sort of have superpowers, and she lives alone. She's a very quirky character, and so like there is that sort of childhood first crush element, but it's not very significant or really leaned into too much. Brendy definitely gives them a hard time, but they're very funny about it. So that's an element, and that makes this feel a little younger than it really reads, I would say. But then we also have another character, Casey. And Casey is an artist and a trans man who moved to New Orleans, or came back, I guess, to New Orleans, having lived there before, and came back after Katrina. And so I think Casey's timeline gives us the actual period for this as being 2018. The Perry Graves sections don't tell us when they're taking place, but I'm assuming they're at the same rough time. So anyway, the Casey sections, because Casey is an artist, we find out that in addition to all this musical stuff that's going on, art is also prominent, and the graffiti is starting to have these strange magical effects in the area. And like people are getting addicted to graffiti, kind of. So yeah, really, really unique, fresh, super different, and all of it's converging to come together, I'm assuming, where both Casey's storyline and Perry's storyline are working to figure out what's going wrong with the city, that all of this strange stuff is happening. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
All right, I'm done with Ballad of Perilous Graves, and I enjoyed this so much. This feels so completely vibrant and alive and exciting to me in terms of fantasy, what's coming out. This is a fairly new release. I think it came out like a year and a half ago. And I'm so sad I have not seen more people talk about this, because this does feel really fresh and unique. I'm also a little surprised I didn't see this marketed as YA. We certainly have younger characters, and predominantly or significantly a coming of age sort of journey is an element to this. Though I guess, yeah, it's not quite that coming of age is like the point, I guess. So I can see an argument either way. I think probably the trans man character is what keeps this from having been marketed as YA. This probably would have done very well. So certainly I feel this is pretty accessible. But it's so lively, it's so funny. It has such a sense of place in New Orleans and such great characterization. Just everyone, especially like the music, these songs that are living characters really come to life. And I love the audiobook. I mentioned early on I had actually turned to the audiobook a little late. I had initially intended to just read it, but there's so much kind of accent work to this, so much singing and music, that doing the audio with reading the print was so helpful, because that is throughout. And the narrator was fantastic. So I really loved this. I think that it really built up to a sense of stakes while also remaining very focused and central to the characters, if that makes any sense. It's not epic, but it is looking at something bigger and these bigger connections and dramas of the city, of its past. Wow. I just really, really liked this. And music was certainly core and completely integral to this story. So I'm very glad that I picked it up for this specific reading vlog, because it fits very, very appropriately. And this was kind of an accidental pick. So I'm thrilled with this one. This was great and will definitely be a standout for me. There was just so much heart to this book, and in many ways, so many aspects of this, and the city specifically. This is really what I wanted the Great Cities books by N.K. Jemisin to be. And like this delivers on so much of what those, for me, didn't work. I guess I know a lot of people have loved those, that duology, but like this had some similar concepts, but is far enough removed. Like it's clearly not just a copy of that. It's not doing exactly the same thing, but it hits the notes and has the vibe that I think Jemisin was going for and didn't quite achieve in my opinion.
So loved it. Definitely looking forward to whatever Alex Jennings comes out with next, because this was great. So with that, onward to the next one whenever I get to it.
So some time has passed. It's been like a year. So if I look different, that's why. And I'm here with my foster Yelly Cat, who may or may not yell at us. She has a need for lots of loving. But I have picked back up with reading for this vlog as a result of the Sound of May readathon. There goes Yelly Cat. She's going to yell at us through this. So I have grabbed The Memory of Whiteness by Kim Stanley Robinson, a science fiction novel with music. And I've just started a little bit. I'm not far into it. So my initial impression is this is really interesting because it doesn't really feel quite like anything I've read before, but it also has some similarities that I'm drawing connections to. And this is following a man, Johann Wright, who is the next master of an orchestra, but it's not an orchestra. It's a sort of instrument. It's this weird, strange instrument that was made by a mathematician, an inventor, an innovator who created all of these technical innovations. His name is Arthur Holywelkin. And so there's all these things that are named after him. But it's this crazy instrument. I think that's the sense that you're supposed to get, with glass arms for all the different types of, so it's all the different types of instruments connected together, basically, if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm not making any sense already. And he is addicted to drugs at the start of this. So there is some sort of crystalline drug that is going around and is deadly, highly deadly. This was written in the 80s, so I have to feel that it's an analog for real world, but it's taken to an extreme where you basically are almost assured to die if you get off of it. And he shows up at the very beginning. The opening scene is him showing up to his previous master of the orchestra and saying, "I'm addicted to the drug." And the master lamenting and just being devastated because he's like, you could have been this great master. We've had generations of this. There have been 8, I think, masters over hundreds of years. And like, you're the next one, and now it's all lost, basically. And so it's this devastating scene, but he says, "I'm going to get off of this drug." And it's kind of like immediately, that's ridiculous. Like, if it really is this serious, there's no way that's going to happen. But he's determined. And he locks himself in a recording room, soundproof, I guess, and he withdraws. He has visions of Arthur Holywelkin, and he comes out of it blind, but with a sense of playing this instrument even more amazingly than he did before, which I don't know how to take that. That seems a little ridiculous, but that's clearly going to shape this whole thing. And what's most interesting, I think, the part that I finished reading before checking in, is that the master says to him, "Oh, well, your blindness won't affect anything that you're doing. It's fine." And he says, "Oh, but it will." And he clearly sees it now as a benefit that he's blind. So really, really interesting way to start the story. Very, very curious. So I can't wait to get into this. It's pretty dense though, but the writing is really straightforward. And as I said, this was written in the 80s. So I was expecting it to feel more dated, but so far it really hasn't kind of had that vibe, but I'm not very far in. So onward to this book. Rue and I have returned to talk about my mid-book update. I'm right about halfway through, and I think I'm liking this, but I don't know what to say about it. It's very confusing, but not in that it's like weird or difficult to follow necessarily. It's kind of abstract, but so after the point where I talked about previously with Johann being blinded and everything, the story launches in with him basically just continuing as normal and being a performer and going about a tour across this section of planets, and where they are is meaningful, and that's talked about in the math reasons. There's a lot of music and math to this. We were introduced also then to sort of a music reporter who is supposed to go to a performance but doesn't make it, and in the process of trying to write his report, he makes a personal connection with Johann. This is Dent Ios is the name of the reporter. And so Johann and Dent sort of become connected and start traveling around together a bit.
and Dent is trying to learn more. But I don't feel any connection between them, really. There's not a lot of emotion in this. And that's really hard to get across. This feels very dry and sciencey in the writing, but yet it's also beautiful. I feel like so many things about this are at odds. We're having some relationship drama going on. We've been introduced to a cult, basically, called the Greys, and that seems to be the rising plot point in the middle here, where we just kind of have gained some significance to them. So there are lots of little bits, lots of little things that I am liking and that I am pulling out of this, but it feels like there's a lot of dead air between, and I don't know what to think about that. It's not cohering for me into anything. Like, I don't know what the narrative or story of this is. It's very abstract. And I wanna read a little bit here, so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about, because like the writing here is really beautiful, really descriptive, but it still feels very sciencey and dry. So some contextualizing information here that Whitsuns and white lines are like space concepts. And I assume Whitsuns, white lines are going to have something to do with Memory of Whiteness. But who knows? They've kind of been explained, but not significantly, or not in a way that makes sense to me, really. And then there is the word soul here, but it's soul as in solar, like sun, not soul as in soul music. In the hallway of the great Orion, Vasero shook his head hard, clearing it of shadows. Out a little hall window, he could still see the white line, bending starlight, and there was the Whitsun burning at its end, illuminating the fairy lamp of Tortuga's blue bubble, there amongst the stars in the pulsing blackness of space. What a world they lived in, how strange and mysterious. And yet suddenly, Vasero saw the analogy on which it had all been constructed. For the giant soul was like the greatness of the human heart, bursting with heat and life, and white lines were like human desires, firing invisibly away from the heart, and the scattering of Whitsuns were like human goals, blazing off in the distance, illuminating the perfect little worlds of our dreams, and with an inchoate solar flare of pain arcing out of the sun in his chest, Anton Vasero realized that for him, the white line machinery was broken beyond repair. And so he's on the losing end, rather, of a love triangle thing going on. But yet there's no like personal emotion to that. There is emotion in there, and there's beauty in there, but it still does feel very detached. And yet, like, it's very descriptive, and I really like the writing. I just don't feel a strong connection to it. So I'm feeling a lot of that with this so far. I have no idea where it's going. I don't have a good handle on the story, but I am really struggling when I sit down to read very much. But I am, I think, enjoying it so far. I don't know. It needs to go somewhere more than it is doing, because right now it feels very meandering. We will check in hopefully next when I'm finished. Though if it does continue on this way, it may be a DNF rather than a finish. We will see. Just dropping in for a quick comment right now. I was reading along and there's a concert and there's a computer error basically and it's oversold. But that is a whole like funny thing to me because this was written in 1985 and so they really wouldn't have had a concept of selling tickets online. So one of the guys is like, oh, I knew you shouldn't sell them on the computer. You need to have physical printed tickets every time. And I was like, you sweet summer child, you have not even begun to even think of the terrors of digital ticketing. But amazing that he was thinking about challenges if you were to go to computerized ticketing in 1985. Well, I have finished The Memory of Whiteness, and sadly not a win for me. It never did finally cohere into anything. I found myself basically for the entire second half just alternating wildly between I'm missing something and I really just need to focus, and so I was like trying so hard to focus and like rereading a lot and just really struggling with the text, and then I would swing the complete opposite where I was like, yeah, this is not helping at all. So I just need to keep plowing forward and keep going. And then I would be back at the other end where I was like, am I missing something? I need to really focus. And neither helped or worked. So there was a lot there. I think I already talked about the major plot elements, the main characters. The characters were not characterized at all. They were very dry and kind of lifeless. I think the one exciting element about Johann was the idea from the intro of him potentially being blind and that affecting his music. And that basically never came up again. So I was super disappointed about that. There is a whole, in the second half, further continued exploration of the Greys and this cult and the factions within those. But I never fully understood what was going on. Didn't feel very well explained. It was just them sort of pursuing this thread of the Greys. And then there's also a major journey, a tour, literally, that takes them between where they are to Mars and to Earth. And that was kind of interesting because we have the idea, I mean, pretty much literally it's just expressed in the heights of different people because Martians are really tall and skinny because of the gravity. People on Earth are very, very short because of the gravity. Like, it was obvious, but there were certain things that were very cool, but then I didn't get a sense of place for anywhere that we were, even though there were overt differences like that. But it was just so strange because I just don't know what the point of the story was. The whole way through, I kind of found myself going, why? Why is any of this happening? Why? What is the point? And so it felt very much to me like this was an early writer, Kim Stanley Robinson. I believe this was his first novel, maybe a very early novel. I think he had some just short work out before this. But it feels like a writer who is not yet mature at his craft, who's like, I'm going to craft my masterwork and blow everybody's minds. And it kind of felt more pretentious and inaccessible than mind expanding to me. So there was a lot here that I did like. I liked a lot of the ideas. I liked a lot in the writing and execution of description, but I don't feel like the story had really anything appealing. Even the orchestra here, which is like the central component to this whole book, and this person playing this orchestra, I still don't have any idea even what the heck it was, or I got the sense of how people emotionally reacted to it, but I don't understand the music. And that's kind of a problem when it's a book about music, we're supposed to be. So I don't know. I don't even know how I'm going to rate this because, like I said, there were so many parts that I liked in this. It just didn't come together at all for me. So hopefully my next book will be somewhat more successful. It's another fantasy, I believe. So we will dive into that and I'll check in once I've read a little bit. Back again with another update, but quickly on the previous book before I move into the new book that I'm reading. Red, Green, and Blue Mars is a trilogy that Kim Stanley Robinson wrote as well after A Memory of Whiteness. And in the middle of Memory of Whiteness, there's a whole section where in the background we have the politics of Mars going on and factions of people. One faction seems to be for Red Mars and the other seems to be for Green Mars, and they're rallying for a vote basically. So I don't think we ever got anything explained what that really is in the book, and I don't think there's any direct connection to the series, the trilogy. But I'm glad to have read this beforehand because of that. It's kind of an Easter egg, I think, a bit, that maybe that was an idea that he later developed into the trilogy later. I have 2 of those books, but I haven't read them yet. So now I need to read those to see, number one, if I feel similarly to A Memory of Whiteness about those and unhaul them, or if I do really find he has matured in that series and what he developed out of it. Anyway, onward to the book I'm actually reading now is The Last Song Before Night by Ilana C. Myers. And I love this cover. It's gorgeous. It looks really like lush and like developed ancient city. And I think I'm not very far. I'm only a couple chapters in, but very strong sense of place with this world building. So much so because it really draws the connection for me to in Dragon Age. There's a cat. In Dragon Age there is a city that is very Venetian inspired and really centers around like art and music, and that is exactly what this is. So if you like that city, this is what you should go to read. even to the point that it's opening with preparations for a masquerade ball, and masquerade balls are huge in that Dragon Age storyline in that city. So, yes, we kind of opened with a mix between not drama and drama, because we're meeting all of these characters. If you can't handle a many POV story, this is not going to be one for you, because I think we got introduced to like 6 characters in the first chapter, and one of them died, but I'm not going to tell you who. But all of them are kind of preparing for this masquerade and thinking about their background and plans for music or poetry or art in some way, performance art. So it seems like we're following mainly performers, really. But one of them dies, and then we also get the nod that there has been a string of murders in this area. So I'm assuming that death was related, though we didn't directly get it commented that it was. But that's pretty much what we've gotten so far, is that this is just flourishing with arts and culture in this area, and they're preparing for this big event that only happens like every 12 years. There is a sense that they have this a multi-deity religion that is involved as well. So lots going on there. I have not gotten really any sense of magic. So it seems like the music is magical, but I don't know yet. I'm really, really liking the sense of world building though. This is definitely my style. Enjoying that. So I will continue on and update you once I am quite a bit further in and have a better sense of the lay of the land of this story. The sun is just really streaming through here today, so I'm making this maybe a little darker than I need to, but I'm trying to make sure I'm at least visible. However, hopefully this should be a somewhat short update. Famous last words from me. But I just have a short update because I'm midway through last song from the night, before night, and not a lot has progressed plot-wise, so I don't think I will have a ton to say, but a lot has happened in terms of character growth and world building. We've gotten a lot more about what's going on in general, though it is kind of slow, and I think having many characters and being so fragmented slows things down a bit, but I am fine with that. I really enjoy character-driven fantasy. We also have not gotten really very much magic at all. So I don't remember if I mentioned this, but very, very early on we had sort of mysterious stranger returning to the city of Tamerlane, where this is all taking place, and that mysterious stranger is clearly very an outsider, outcast sort, but very powerful and high up in the rankings of these poets. We've also gotten a lot more world building about that. These poets are really just bards. I mean, I wish they had just used the term rather than poets, but I can kind of understand it. But very much it's song performance and writing. And you can tell that the academy has very strict hierarchy. They control who gets to perform. They must have gone through the academy. They must know sort of the rules and bounds, and they approve all of the songs that get performed in certain contexts or in most contexts. So they also teach about the hidden meanings and subtext of words. So that is really cool. Like, I could read a whole book just about that aspect of the academy. I would be all over it. But that means that these people are writing songs that on the surface may come across as just beautiful nature writing, you know, but then there is a hidden subtext to virtually every word that they're including that may be very meaningful to the people who are hearing it. And so this mysterious outsider performs a song that contains some really radical and conflict-driving subtext to it, really, and creates a kerfluffle. And so that really is our sort of big main plot. And then the background plot is to do with those murders that I mentioned, and much more insidious. And so we've been getting a very dark thread through here, a little bit. But those are not what's taking up the most page space. It's mostly about character growth. And so I think from there, the real advancement in plot is about a couple of our characters, individually and separately, have gone off on a journey to seek the path, the capital P path. A fabled poet of old once found this path to other worlds. And I don't have a full grasp on the what and why to do with that. I think we will get it. It feels like every single thing that's introduced, we almost get introduced to it and then we wait to get explained what it actually is or does. So anyway, I expect we will understand that better. But a couple of people are individually off seeking the path, and it's off in the mountains somewhere. And supposedly someone has found it way in the past, but nobody really knows where it is. And it's really funny. So someone remarks that the path being in the mountains is a bit like saying the needle is in the haystack. That's just a great way of putting it. So
naturally these people are off on this journey individually and separately, and they kind of come together and join forces. So that I figure is going to be the bulk of this. It's interesting because it seems like the lot in life for these poet bards is to be off wandering the road to find stories to perform. But it seems weird that there was this gap in time where people were not looking for the path, because that feels like it would be the natural thing to do if you're a really serious bard, right? But they haven't been for a long time, and now these people setting off is something that hasn't really happened, and it seems like it's creating sort of almost a cultural movement around it. So that's curious, but I don't know where this is going. So I am enjoying it so much, though. So I hope it continues to develop, and we learn more about both the world and the academy and the path. So I will probably next check in at the finish of this, because there has been so little plot, but maybe I will run into something staggering that I feel like I need to check in on before then, but probably we will be at the end next time I chat with you. Finally, I can wrap this up for you. The Last Song Before Night by Alana C. Meyer is finished. It's been a long time coming for me. So we're rounding out the vlog with this book. I enjoyed this in the end quite a bit. So it was probably a 4-star read, really liked it, but also a bit more mixed than I was, I think, at the halfway point. Right after that, this is a 4-part book, and after part 2, going into part 3, we completely shifted gears and sort of walked away from even looking at or talking about the path part of the storyline for a while, and dabbled a little bit into some of the darker parts more. I felt that entire part could have been cut entirely or trimmed down and combined with part 4. So that felt a bit of a slog, though there was a lot of great world building and character growth during that period. It just felt like that should have been peppered more through naturally. And then part 4, I felt like did come to a really good and fairly satisfying climax. And I had thought that this was a series of companion novels, but it is not, I don't think. I think it's sequential novels that each engage with a different art. So I think book 2 is focused more on dance. And I have no idea how that would even play in, because we got so little of an understanding of how the magic works in this, to do with the poets as it is. So I would say definitely this is like a soft magic system. You never get the details, or I never even had really an understanding of what was going on with the magic at all, just simply that it was happening. I would say this is probably secondary world low fantasy most, so it's right on the line for me, because the magic is so prominent and present, but it's not a majority of the book. It's not any significant amount of the book. It's like the center of the focus of the book in terms of plot, but it's not like we're not casting spells on every single page or anything. So I feel like that qualifies it as a secondary world low fantasy much more than it would high fantasy. Let's see, what else would I say about this? I really enjoyed the characters. I think characters and world building were prominently the strong points of this book, and that should be unsurprising given everything I just said. But yeah, I just found that so many of the characters were really nuanced, and this is doing something that involves a lot of interpersonal conflicts and betrayals and the growth of relationships and empathy between characters. So there's a lot of back and forth between the different characters, even as we're journeying and stuff, and people are going away from each other and then finding their way back to each other and having those conversations as they develop and progress. I love that element. And so that was what really kept me going, and why I ended up liking this as much as I did. But it had some struggles throughout that kept me from just really loving it. I think had we had a more prominent understanding of the magic, I would have liked it more. I think that some of the dark elements got really dark, and I was surprised by that. But overall, the characters are what really just brought me through this. I really enjoyed getting to know them, and so many of them had real difficulties in their lives that were explained in such a sympathetic way, and there were some real like SA situations, people with hard family backgrounds. I think one of the main character, really, Lynn, is this woman who is not allowed to perform as a woman because women aren't allowed to be poets, and she dresses like a man, and some people know, some people don't know that she's doing this, but she is able to finagle her way. We have another woman who has kind of found power as a sort of a prostitute, but like a very high-end prostitute, because these men like to sort of play act that they're getting with a noble lady. And so she's found her own power and agency in that in some ways. And I think it does that from a lens that I haven't seen a lot, where it's more sympathetic and less male gazy, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think that overall, with the 3 books that I read, I think I got something out of all of them. A Memory of Whiteness was the biggest struggle, and I think in the end, I probably enjoyed the least, but I also don't regret having read it. I think I got a lot out of it, and it made me want to read some other stuff by Kim Stanley Robinson. I think that the first book was just the most enjoyable in general, and this one I think I would solidly recommend to epic fantasy readers. I just am less of that than most fantasy readers. I tend to like the weird stuff, and this is not very weird. This is different in that it's focused so much on magic and sort of bardic performance, but it's not really anything outside of the norm, and that's really what I'm looking for, is outside of the norm usually. So overall, a great reading vlog. That was 3 books I have intended to get to for a long time that I haven't gotten to. So let me know if I've interested you in any of these books, or if you have any suggestions for other musical or performance art type of fantasy and sci-fi, because I'm always on the lookout for that kind of stuff, because that is less than the norm, so in my niche. So let me know any suggestions you have down below, and thank you so very much for watching.